What's up, Coin Concede crowd? I'm Rob from Velen's Chosen podcast.
And I'm Eve.
And I'm Grant.
And you're about to hit your first turn for
Coin
Concede.
Greetings.
Hello.
My greetings.
Well met.
I greet you.
Greetings, traveler.
Greetings, friend.
The pleasure is mine.
Hello and welcome to episode 137 of Coin Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. Joining me from Gadgetan, New York, it's me, Ridiculous Hat. And from Karazhan, California, we have our good friend Botticus. Botticus, how are you?
Doing great. How are you, Hat?
I'm alright. Thanks for asking. From the Maelstrom, Louisiana, we have our buddy Appa. Say hello, Appa.
Hi. How's it going?
It's pretty good. We're doing a podcast.
We are doing a podcast. I'm excited.
Me too, because we've got a special guest joining us from... I didn't ask what place you wanted to be from. Well, from...
Beautiful.
Go ahead. Go.
Beautiful British Columbia? What would you call that in World of Warcraft?
Well, it doesn't have to be specifically related to the locale. How about Sholazar Basin? Because I was questing there recently.
How about Nagrand?
Nagrand, okay. So you are... Isn't that like the plague place?
No, Nagrand is in Draenor. It's the beautiful place where all the floating islands with the waterfalls coming down.
That sounds nice. Okay.
I remember Nagrand. Nagrand is very nice. It's very beautiful.
It seems very, very... And was it in Burning Crusade?
Yes.
So it's in BC?
Oh my gosh. You did it.
You did it.
Tied it up.
We
You
did
made it
this
work.
together. So, joining us from Nagrand Burning Crusade, we have the great LoremasterEve joining us all the way from the Velen Chosen podcast. Eve, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being so patient as I finished up casting a UHL match with Cinder, which ran longer than expected.
That'll happen. I mean, if you're hanging out with Cinder, aren't you really on Coin Concede already?
I kind of felt like it was all a part of each other. He was like, I'll hand you off to the rest of the guys when we were on it at the end. Felt like one big family.
It all worked out. And, I mean, well, we'll talk about it, but casting UHL and being a part of it is totally worth the time. So, before we get into that, we want to make a brief note to all of our listeners out there. Coin Concede is supported in large part by you, person who's listening to this, and other listeners. If you'd like to find out how you can support us and receive rewards in return, head to patreon.com/coinconcede. We want to make a brief note here. We'll mention it in our tournament section as well, but our Coin Concede Listener League, this Sunday at 4 o'clock Eastern, we'll be casting our finals. And by we, I mean mid-game, our amazing administrator and Coin Concede community member and generally wonderful person and person with endearing Australian accent, and finalist in So You Think You Can Cast. So you definitely want to hear him casting. He's going to bring the friend of his that he actually submitted his So You Think You Can Cast entry to, and that'll be this Sunday at 4 o'clock Eastern. The EU finals will be cast, followed by the NA semifinal and final. So definitely check that out. All right. But we're going to do a little interview with our guest, Eve.
Everyone, get in here!
Hello, Eve.
Hello.
For those who may not know you, give us a little bit of background into who you are.
Let's see. I am a lover of lore. That's how I got my name. It was coined by the good people who listen to the show, who are like, what is Finnevar? What does it mean and why is it spelled that way? So we decided to get rid of it and change it to something that people could remember and made more sense. I started out playing World of Warcraft for a good 5 years, and like pretty intensely, until it became too much to handle with marriage and 3 kids. And And then Hearthstone came along, and I was like, perfect, something that has a lot of WoW lore, so I can kind of feel right at home with it, the cards and the characters. But you can also just pick it up and put it down. I had a background in Magic the Gathering, so I felt like I knew card games and I could figure this out pretty easily. And then got into podcasting with Rob and Grant. Before actually Grant, it was Andrew. Andrew of the Happy Hearthstone started out at Valen's Chosen and then went on to make his own show. And yeah, so that's kind of where I came from and now where we are now.
So what is a Finnevar?
Finnevar is what happens when you try and make an original name in World of Warcraft. You have to add a bunch of H's and N's and R's because every possible name has been taken.
So there were Finnevars with like one R existed?
Yeah.
But you had
Well, Finnevar is like a variation of Guinevere. Guinevere is from the Knights of the Round Table from King Arthur mythology, and Finnevar is a variation of Guinevere. So it's like you go from there to there to there, and then you get this FHINNOVARR. And then I started using that as a whole bunch of different names, like on Twitter and on Twitch and things, but nobody knew what it meant, and it wasn't identifying me very well. So we switched all of them to Loremastereve.
I see why they call you the Loremaster, and that wasn't even about World of Warcraft, so I'm glad you're more recognizable because having to spell your name in the Contact Us would have been complicated, but also that's pretty cool. So, and you said you had a Magic the Gathering background. Tell us a little bit about your story, a little bit more in depth about how you got into gaming in general and the path that led you from general gaming to Magic to WoW/Hearthstone, because it seems like there's kind of a fork in the road there that kind of came back together on the other side.
Well, it started with like Mario and the Nintendo. It was like the first time I got into gaming. But we came from a family of 8 children. So it's not like my parents had cash to spend on like the next console that came out and the next console and the next console. So it was kind of like Nintendo, Duck Hunt, that was it. And then when I moved out of the house, I was like, I love gaming and I want to get my own. So Nintendo 64, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and that got me solid into gaming. And then after I got married, here's the thing. I'm talking to a bunch of guys, but when you have your first child, it involves a lot of staying up all night and being kind of bored because you're all by yourself and you're feeding a baby and you're maybe changing diapers. And this is like the perfect time for a video game that you can sit down and play and while feeding the baby at the same time. And this is how I started playing World of Warcraft, because I had to stay up for hours in the middle of the night with like nobody to chat to and nothing to do. And that's how I started getting into like deep into World of Warcraft, playing it for hours and hours and hours at a time, because it was something to do while you were doing something that didn't really require you to be mentally engaged. You could just like be there feeding baby and playing video games. So that became very addictive to me because I was home for a long time taking care of my 3 children. I was a stay-at-home mom. And I started having this social guild of people that were interested in the same things I was into and talked about the same things I loved. And it gave me a social life when I was staying at home with the kids and I didn't have much of a social life. But I had to get out of it after a while. After 5 years of playing, it was like, okay, this is starting to become too intensive of raiding for 4 and 5 hours every other night. It's not healthy anymore. It's something that I have to give up for the health of me and for my family. And so I had to let it go. But that's why I got into the card games first, Magic the Gathering, because I could play that with my husband and with my kids. And then Hearthstone was something you didn't have to, at first, spend a lot of money on. Still, comparatively to Magic the Gathering, it's nowhere near the time sink and the money sink involved to get all of the cards to play competitively in Magic the Gathering. Like the people who complain about how much Hearthstone costs, trust me, you have no idea. Way less expensive than Magic the Gathering by a long shot. And it was something that was really beautiful. Like when you play the cards and they have the animations when they come down, and they all have this cool thing they say when they attack and when they come down and when they die, and all of the thought and effort that was put into this game, it was just immediately captivating. So that, and plus it was like I get to touch something that still has something to do with World of Warcraft. It's like still on the edge of it without being this addictive deep time sink of a thing. So that appealed to me.
I mean, it seems like it hit all the buttons for you, though I would challenge addictive deep time sink, because you say it's not addictive, but you're currently on your second podcast of the week about the game after casting a match about the game. So
I think that's my personality. Like,
there's no judgment. I'm not judging.
I try and give myself boundaries where I'm like, okay, this is something that I can put down and walk away. And then I get so deep into it that it's creating a life that is not. Yeah. You're calling me out on this hat.
Well, that's the thing, though, right? Because I was also severely, like, addicted into WoW for a few years. And, like, the problem with WoW was you could never just sit down and play for 20 minutes. Like, that never really felt like an option with WoW, because if you sit down for 20 minutes, you get essentially nothing done. Like, it's just kind of a waste of time. So every time you're going into a session, you're going like probably minimum 2 hours. For me, it was more like 6 to 8 hours in general. And like Hearthstone, it really feels like, yes, if you have the time to devote to sessions that long, you can. But if you only need to bust out like a couple games, you can do that in 20 minutes and then go do something else. Or like you can split it up into chunks instead of having it be this kind of all-consuming thing that doesn't really require your attention but requires your presence. Like you can't just like not be at the computer and be playing World of Warcraft. So like yeah, I think the Hearthstone at least has the potential to be more more healthy in terms of your ability to not have to be there for hours at a time.
Well, it's about
like
balance.
you said, you feel like you accomplished something in that amount of time with Hearthstone. Like even though you only put 20 minutes into it, you feel like you did something. And with World of Warcraft, yeah, you barely scratched the surface.
Well, and Eve, I have no moral high ground to call you out when I've determined in this past 15 minutes that my gaming and sleeping habits are the same as you when you had a newborn, but I have no children. So, believe me, there's no moral high ground here, because when you say, oh, just stay up all night with nothing to do, so I guess I'll play WoW, I hit level 72 yesterday on my death night. So anyways,
and which character is that? How many characters do you have at max level right now?
Only 2. I'm leveling my 3rd, and I don't play the first one anymore because Affliction Warlock is boring.
Oh hat.
It's anyways. We're interviewing. This is not about me. I don't want to make this about me. Okay, so you talked a little bit about this, about the captivation of Hearthstone, and I agree. Kind of that sense of polish coming in, especially from Magic, where inanimate chunks of cardboard compared to this whimsy that you get when you touch a card. You get the interaction and the animations and the sounds are a really big part of it. But what has kind of kept you going in Hearthstone as well? What do you connect with in the game? What really speaks to you?
The community, more than anything else, keeps me coming back. And it's honestly the same thing that kept me coming back to World of Warcraft. Blizzard has this great ability to create games that people make communities around. Like the guild system in World of Warcraft made you care about people, and that's why you kept coming back to the game. And it's the same thing with Hearthstone. They go through seasons where there's not a deck that I want to play. There's not one that interests me or is something that makes me excited to go back again and again. But the community that surrounds Hearthstone is amazing. It's unlike any other community I've ever been a part of. So even when the game itself is not in a state where I'm excited to play it, I'm excited to be a part of what's going on, and I want to be able to be a part of the conversation. I want to know what I'm talking about and being able to put my 2 cents in when other people are talking about decks, and so I need to go in and play them so I have a voice, so I can be a part of the community, and also the podcast. So yeah, it's a great game. But great games generally only last for a certain amount of time, and then you get tired of them and you move on to the next thing. And the reason that I've stuck around in Hearthstone for so long is because of the people. They keep you coming back.
So would you say is your approach to ladder? Like how do you approach the game when you're trying to when you actually just like queue up for games? What do you usually like to do?
I want to find a game that speaks to me, or sorry, a deck, like a class or a deck or an idea that speaks to me that I find fun. I can't play just to try and ladder up. Like, even if there's a really great deck out there that's doing great things and it's easy to pilot and it's got a high win rate, I don't want to play it if I'm not going to have fun. So I am a spike, as Grant says, but not to the point where I'm going to make myself miserable just to win, which makes it hard for me if I play in a meta that there isn't anything exciting that I personally am interested in. So I'm looking for that deck that's like, this is cool, this is fun, I want to play it. And right now that's Spell Hunter for me. Mostly because of Rexar. He provides like the difference every game where you press the button and you're like, what creature am I going to build? And Rock Pilar, what spells are just going to pop out of that and fill my hand? You know, so the random things that make it interesting, which is why Evolve Shaman was a big love of mine for a long time, was every game has to be different. Every game has to have a certain amount of randomness in it where you still get to make choices and you still, it's not like Yogg. It's not a Yogg Saron game, but that kind of deck. And to be honest, I'm pretty much an aggro player. I'm pretty much like a minion-based deck player, so it has to be something like that. I am not a control player. I've never liked playing those kinds of games. So if there's something out there like that that I'm interested in playing, then I will play the heck out of that.
So like maybe a paladin deck that you might have had a pretty good climb recently. Why don't you, for our listeners that didn't hear you during that month, why don't you tell them about that climb that you had what was it, 2 months back, I believe?
Yes, I think it was 2 months. I went to Wild because the meta was so to me in Standard. I couldn't find anything I was interested in, but I still wanted to be able to play Hearthstone. So I went to Wild. I found Secret Paladin, which, I mean, Sunkeeper Tarim is really fun in that deck. And then Call to Arms is fun in that deck. And
for
being able
who?
to play with things
Who
like
was that card
Shielded
fun
Minibot.
for?
Oh, Minibot is so good.
Like, don't feel bad for them because in Wild, all the rest of the classes are doing crazy things too. Like, they have a whole bunch of things that you don't have access to in Standard anyway. So Call to Arms is not as broken against them because they have like a million crazy things to deal with it.
They had a Sea Witch that costed 5 mana.
Exactly. They could have like a board full of giants against you on turn 5. So don't feel sorry for them. They deserve no pity. So I used Aggro Shaman and Secret Paladin to go to Legend for my very first time 2 months ago in Wild. And then I kept going and I got to rank 6 Legend.
Just, casual rank 6 Legend. First time. No big deal.
Yeah, I was over the moon. I was just so happy about it. I couldn't believe it. And I was so thrilled. And it was so, like, the feeling you get for the very first time when you hit Legend, I don't think you can replicate in any of the next times that people make Legend. I've only done it once, so I can't say. But that very first time you hit Legend, I don't think there's anything like it.
Yeah, I still remember the first time I hit Legend. I had to go outside and, like, fist pump in the air. It was like 11 o'clock at night, just pitch black out.
That's what Rob said to me. He's like, did you go wake your husband up? Because I did it at like 3 a.m. I was like, no, I knew I wasn't going to get the kind of reaction I wanted if I woke him up. I knew I'd get a better reaction if I waited. So I told him in the morning.
Man, rank 6 Legend. Well, and also, you have another accomplishment. You are one of the chosen. Velen's chosen. So, tell us a little bit about that. I think you had made mention, and for those that don't know, Velen's chosen, in addition to being a Hearthstone card, is the podcast that Eve is on regularly, and you should listen to that. We've had Grant Watchman on the show before. We haven't had Rob on the show yet, but he lives in Japan and his time zone is complicated.
Yeah.
But so you
It's
had mentioned Andrew. So walk us through how you entered into the world of content creation.
It was so random. Like looking back on it, every time somebody asked me how it worked out and how we got together, I'm like, I don't even know how it worked out because we were all playing together on Google Hangouts. Did you guys ever get into that? There was this Google Hangouts group that would go post on Reddit and they would leave a link there and be like, if you want to come and have a Hearthstone night, you clicked on it and you went into this group of people that were on chat and they just organized games against each other. It was back in the day when you pressed the random make a random deck button, it actually made you a random deck. Now it apparently makes you the exact same deck every time. So it's not completely random, but it used to be just like leave your deck slot empty and just fill it and it would be random cards. And then we play against each other, having no idea what was in our deck, having no deck synergy at all. You could have like secret keepers with no secrets in your deck and just the silliness and the fun that we had against each other. And I met Rob and Andrew in that group. And then he just put out on Twitter one day, would anybody be interested in making a Hearthstone podcast? And I'd been listening to a couple. I listened to The Angry Chicken and I listened to The Instance. And they made it kind of sound like anybody could do it. Like you could just get a couple of friends together and record and put it out on iTunes and see what would happen. So it seemed very doable. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to talk to somebody about Hearthstone because I got to be honest with you. My entire family has no interest in games. Like out of the 8 children, out of the 7 other siblings that I have, they've literally no interest in anything I'm interested in too. So I had nobody to talk to about all the cool stuff that I thought was so exciting and so interesting. So I was like, I would like to talk to someone else about the things I like and get together on a podcast and do that. And we got together and we had a meeting and we're like, okay, so what niche are we going to carve out? What is not really being covered right now? Like what kind of people are we going to speak to? And created the identity and then thought of the name. We're going to be kind of like a teaching podcast. So we have to think of this figure out of World of Warcraft that's like wise. And Velen, Prophet Velen came out of that. And it just was kind of out of a couple conversations. And then we did our first couple podcasts and we had like good chemistry and we just kept doing it. And here we are today.
And the moral of the story is, all you have to do to make a podcast is talk with a bunch of your friends and put it on iTunes, plus about a bunch of, like, 20 hours of work a week. Warning for those at home.
Rob is the one who does all the editing.
Yeah.
So that part, I think, is the most difficult part about making a podcast. If you want it to sound really clear and nice and not hurt people's ears, that's the toughest part about it. And he does all that. So thank you, Rob,
Yes.
so much for being the one to do all the hard work.
Thank you, Hat.
Well, Rob helped me learn how to do this as well, so I appreciate that. But yeah, definitely big shout outs to Rob, and the community as a whole is very supportive in that sort of thing. If you're struggling or learning, there are tons of people out there that will help you do what you do or do what you need to do. But I would actually argue, I'd say the most difficult part of making a podcast is making it every week. Making the first one is
Yeah.
easy.
Being consistent, yeah.
Yeah.
Not only does Rob do Velen's Chosen, he also does Omniclab, an Overwatch podcast. So he just doubles up every week.
And
Guys.
it's very popular. Omniclab is like
Yeah.
huge in Overwatch.
Yeah, if y'all play Overwatch, Omniclab is awesome.
Yeah.
That is like the
It's the best one.
Overwatch podcast. It's way up there, and you know, it's a lot of work to get that going. Though he's also on there with Andres, who I believe is literally a sound engineer. So
Yeah,
like,
Andres takes care of the editing on that side, I think, which makes his load a little lighter.
yeah, but it's still the most difficult part of the podcast. And I know we've talked about this before, and I don't want to diverge too much, but it's really just about doing it every week and continuing it, even when there's that consistent pressure to get it done, and maybe there's some down weeks, or maybe there's some less exciting news weeks, or maybe you want to take this week off and do it next week. It's maintaining that consistency and the audience and all that is I think more difficult than any of the technical part, because creative burnout is a very real thing, and I agree 100% that it's all about community that keeps it going. Anyways, to avoid digressing again, because I keep doing that, so you change your name from Finavar to LoremasterEve. Now, how did you become the Loremaster? You have a real passion for lore. We've already heard it in this episode. But where did this passion come from, and how do you find it? How do you find yourself channeling it in your content?
I'm not sure exactly which episode it started, but it started with a low news week where there wasn't a ton to talk about. And there were a couple new cards out, and I was like, I bet a bunch of people who play Hearthstone never played World of Warcraft, and they don't know who these characters are. So why don't we just every week kind of talk about, we'll start with the heroes, Jaina, Thrall, give a little bit of background about them, and sort of flesh out the game a bit for people who never played World of Warcraft. And then that just caught on fire. Like, I got so many responses from it saying this made it like so much more interesting to see these cards when they came down and the heroes and stuff, because I didn't know anything about World of Warcraft and this is so fascinating. And so we were like, okay, let's keep doing this. And then every time we had like a slow work week, we put in another lore moment. I'd like ask the community what they were more curious about, what they were interested in, and picked a card and just told people.
Keep going.
Sorry. Told people about, first of all, the heroes, and then like a lot of legendaries, gave stories behind them. And then I got to the point where that was more interesting to me than anything else. And I wanted to go deeper into it, but we had kind of a time limit on our show. Rob was like, please, we can't keep making these 2-hour long shows. This is too much. Our listeners aren't going to listen all the way to the end. So I kind of split it off and made it a standalone thing for the different stories that I wanted to go like really deep into, talking about the origin of Azeroth, the world of World of Warcraft, and things like that. And then we started the the lore episodes. And then those times where you said we had a down week where like we were all sick or we just needed a vacation, Rob had these episodes where he could put them up and be like, here's something for our listeners to listen to, and we all can kind of have a break and have a get well week and then get back to it the next week. So that was really helpful as well.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of remember when you started with the lore moments, and it was almost a side bit. Like, I think the first one I listened to was actually on the show, was a brief thing. It was Lillian Voss, or maybe it was the Skeleton Knight. It was one of those two.
I think Lillian Voss was. You know what? I think maybe Van Cleef was the first big one.
Yeah.
Edwin Van Cleef. Yeah. And then Lillian Voss was the next one after that.
Yeah, and that was super cool. And actually, I brought it up to the WoW guildies even before I was playing much, and they were all like, "Oh man, Lillian Voss, she's so cool." And so, you're right that the feedback was kind of rippled across the Twitter sphere a little bit, because I don't think anyone had highlighted this aspect of the game in that particular way. And I remember it really drove me to make the time for Velen's. The longer episodes, they are what they are. I mean, it'd be hypocritical for us to complain about 2-hour episodes because we do that every week. But there are two things that Velen's really has going for it, and one is King Julian accent, and two is the lore, and that's in addition to some really, really great content. And what Grant had done with his deck guides, especially like the wild deck guides, was really cool. There's a lot of good stuff going on over there. But it's pretty cool how you kind of found that niche, because it was something that no one else had really done before, and I don't think anyone else has come close to doing since. Go ahead.
I like telling stories. Like, it's something that really appeals to me. I like doing it with my kids, sitting down and telling them a story. And so it was really something I enjoyed doing a lot. And then I found an audience for it, which is like the best thing you can do, is having something you love doing and then have an audience that loves listening to it. It works out really well. But there's a thing with the Hearthstone podcast, is that it's not something that you can go back to the very beginning and listen to them, because the meta is constantly changing and the cards are constantly changing. So with different podcasts that you discover, like a comedy podcast, you can go back to podcast number 1 and listen to them all from the beginning and enjoy it. But with something that covers a changing scene like Hearthstone, you can't do that because it'll mean nothing. You go back to classic Hearthstone and that information is not going to help you at all. But if we put something in like the lore moments, then there was something that people could kind of go back to and catch up on that was still re-listenable. So that was something that was interesting to like Rob and Grant to be putting into the show. That was kind of my argument for having it be a regular thing on the show, was that it was something that people could go back and listen to. And even if the rest of the episode might not hold up over time, that the lore moments would.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lore moments, a lot of them are, I mean, it's timeless stuff, right? Because the game and the universe around the game has existed for so long that you can kind of talk about these evergreen concepts, and some of them translate pretty well to Hearthstone. Like Edwin Van Cleve is an evergreen card, so there's a lot that goes on there that you can kind of highlight that many Hearthstone players may not have been exposed to. What other content have you found yourself making, whether you've been like a subject or a contributor or the orchestrator of it? I know you've put up some YouTube videos lately.
Right. I actually had a fan of the show buy me one of the World of Warcraft Chronicles and mail it to me. And that
Wow.
was amazing. I thanked him on the show. And then I had another listener reach out and say, if you recorded yourself reading those books out loud, I would totally listen to that. But I couldn't do it on a podcast because that is way too close to an audiobook, and I would definitely get sued by Blizzard. So I reached out to Blizzard and was like, if I read this book out loud on YouTube, would that be okay? Would you guys have a problem with that? And unofficially, I got a response from somebody who worked at Blizzard saying, if you do a quick Google search in YouTube, there's people who have done that already, and it's very easy to find, and they haven't been taken down. So you're probably good. It wasn't like they're saying, yes, we're fine with it, go ahead and do it. But it was like, nobody else is getting in trouble for doing it already. So if you want to do it, go ahead. So I do have a bunch of videos on YouTube where I read the World of Warcraft Chronicle Volume 1, if people are interested in listening to that. And then just kind of out of the lore moments and the encouragement I got from the listeners saying, this is really cool, we like this a lot, I looked into becoming an audiobook narrator. And that is something that I'm pursuing right now as well. So it sort of spun off into a possible job that could pay money someday.
You might be an official paid storyteller.
My dream is to be able to narrate a World of Warcraft novel. That's like the top echelon of, if I could do that, I could die and go to heaven and be happy.
That's like the Loremaster Hall of Fame.
Yes. That's my dream. Go to BlizzCon and be able to narrate an official, like, Christie Golden World of Warcraft novel. That'd be it. I'd be happy.
We got to get you on that panel. Because they had the Badass Women of Hearthstone or Badass Women of Blizzard voice actor panel, and so we just got to get you. We got to get you on that panel, and then we got to get you to have a Loremaster character in the game. You can be a panda.
Oh my gosh, I would die. It would not be a panda though.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. So
it would be a Draenei Paladin. That's what it would be.
Speaking of important questions, Horde or Alliance?
You can't put me on the spot like that.
You know already. You're just afraid to say it. Everybody knows.
Listen, I made Loremaster. My first Loremaster character was Alliance. It was a Draenei Paladin that made Loremaster. But I felt like in order to do it justice, I had to get Loremaster on both sides. So I went and started playing Horde all the way through to get Loremaster on both sides. And I found the Horde side very interesting and compelling. So I'm not as like full on Alliance as I used to be. Like, Sylvanas is really cool.
You know what? You're right.
No, I'm not gonna say it.
I almost caught you.
It was a really cool cinematic, though, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, when we saw it live at BlizzCon, it was chills. Like, chill city.
wow.
It was so good.
I'll say it. Horde's the right answer.
Thank you.
Listen, Anduin's mass res was pretty freaking cool, too.
He cheated. You can't do
Like-
that in combat. And
I know, but everybody immediately knew what he had done. So,
Yeah, he cried and then he cheated. Sounds like alliance.
he drew on the strength that was in him the entire time. He faced his true self instead of trying to be his father, instead of trying to be a warrior, which is not what he was. He embraced the light. He embraced being a priest. I don't know. It was a pretty strong, beautiful moment to me.
It's the same plot as the magic shoes. Where the shoes,
Right.
you know, you have the shoes and you find them and they let the kid dance, but then the kid forgets the shoes. No, the magic was in you all along. Meanwhile, Sylvanas turns into a banshee and sets a tower on fire. Okay, we're not gonna get into this. Friendships will be torn asunder. It'll be like Battle for Azeroth, all up in here in Coin Concede. But anyways, Bot, I think you have a question.
Yeah, let's get back on topic here, Hat. So, Eve, I understand you are now part of the UHL for season 2. So, kind of, how did you get involved in it? How have you been enjoying it? And what have you kind of learned? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of your first foray into like a tournament style setting where there's like well, I guess there's no bans in UHL, but there's, you know, bringing multiple decks and stuff like that.
Yeah, literally any tournament. This is the first time I've been in any kind of Hearthstone tournament at all. Yeah, what's his name? I'm sorry, I don't remember. Ferris Biscuit, yeah?
Yep.
Ferris Biscuit reached out
He's
to
the man.
me and said, "Would you be interested in being a part of UHL?" And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he was trying to make sure that there was a variety, like making sure there were women involved as much as possible, and you know, making sure there were a variety of people in UHL. And I was excited to be a part of that. I didn't know how much time and effort was going to be sucked into this project, and it's been a little bit more than I expected it was going to be. But that's also because I didn't go into it just to have fun and to play silly decks. I went into it with the idea of being very competitive, so that's something I put on myself. And of course, when I looked at the very first lineup and I was like, ridiculous Hat? This is my very first tournament ever. And the very first person I'm going to go up against is the person who won last year's tournament?
Good luck,
I may
have fun.
been yeah, I may have been a little outraged. Like, to throw me into the deep end of the pool, why don't you?
No,
Like,
it's the
don't
shallow
start
end,
me out
Eve.
with something
I'm-
easy, something soft, to give
I'm
me a
5
soft
feet
ball.
tall, Eve.
No.
It's the shallow end. I'm very
I love
short.
the UHL because so many people in it are like, "Hey, let's have fun little like restrictions, and let's play these fun decks, and let's meme around." And Hat's like, "I'm gonna play a tier 1 deck. I'm gonna play it really well, and you're gonna lose. And currently undefeated. So what now?"
Listen, I don't mean to besmirch anyone that wants to enjoy themselves and meme off or whatever. I'm just going to say, literally not one person has offered to meme off against me, and every single person has also brought super competitive decks. I don't know if I foster that in people, but no one has been like, you want to build all odd decks with a ton of legendaries? No one's bringing that up to me. I'm just saying.
So this is for all of the rest of Hat's competitors. You've heard it. You would just have to reach out to him and say, these are the things that we need to do, and he will go along with whatever you suggest. You heard it here on the show.
Especially
Watch somebody reach out to him now and him just be like, "Lol, no."
It's
Well,
my only opponent left is
already
Ziggy.
locked for the top 4 or whatever.
Yeah.
He's like, "Sure, whatever. Yeah, you want to meme? Sure, we could do whatever."
I still remember the first game I casted wasn't this season, it was last season, and me and Cinder did it, and Hat just went the casual Keleseth, Shadow Step, Keleseth, Shadow Step, Keleseth on 2. I was like, oh, okay, so this is what it's like. This is what it's like being a hat.
He had Flappy Bird on turn 3 for me, and the first time it got Wind Fury. So
Oh
yeah,
my
that's how it rolls.
It's I feel like, am I the baddie? Am I the Lich King? Like, what's going on here? Am I stealing people's souls? I'm feeling pretty rough right now.
No, you're just playing good Hearthstone cards.
It's man.
Yeah. So this was my introduction to UHL. Yes, this is how I started out. I went up against Ridiculous Hat, got my face bashed in, and went, okay, I need to rethink this. How am I going to play? How am I going to enjoy UHL? So I kind of took a look at the other people playing in the scene and was like, I think Nate Wolf was the one who brought Quest Paladin and was like, oh, this is what other people are doing and having fun with. Maybe I should try that out. It's been a learning experience. I've learned to think about the decks that I'm bringing as response to the decks that my opponent is bringing, and then which order I have to play those decks in to try and ensure my best matchups. I want to ask your guys' opinion. The advice that I was given was you go with your worst one first and you play it until you win. Is that kind of like a rule of thumb? You don't want to be stuck with your worst one as the last deck that you're playing.
There's a lot of different approaches to the Conquest format. I could see that being one of them. The other one is you full random whatever deck you start with so that your opponent cannot get an advantage on what you're going to be bringing out first. Or you... and then basically you queue based off of what happens. So if you win, then you can kind of still queue randomly, but if you lose, then you have a better idea what the other two decks that they still have are, and then you queue from there, basically trying to line up your best matchups. I mean, it's really just trying to make the highest percentage choices that you think is going to net you wins.
Yeah, a lot of the time I'll just like run out my best one first. Because if it's the best one, I might as well just run it first. But if there's like one deck like that has a really terrible matchup against one specific deck in the other person's lineup, I'll like run that out first because you have the highest percentage to dodge that matchup. If you run out like that deck first, like say if you have Tempo Mage and they have like Odd Warrior and two other decks, then if you run out Tempo Mage first, then there's 2 out of 3 you just won't hit the Odd Warrior.
Yeah, that sounds solid.
Or if one of your decks just literally can only beat one of their decks, like you have terrible matchups against the other two, then sometimes you have to run it out first, because if you queue a different deck and they queue that deck and get a win with it, then you don't get to play against that deck again.
Yeah, you just like can't actually afford not playing that matchup.
Yeah, so it's different in Conquest. Or it's weird in
Or you
Conquest.
throw that match, but that doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Throwing a match would not work.
No.
It's throwing matches is bad, but yes, it's I think I generally agree with like the if you have a good general spread but one particular weak spot in a deck, I usually start with that. Usually you want the most the deck with the most even spread of matchups should probably be near the end. Unless you also have a deck like Appa was saying that has a really specific target, and then you probably have the more even deck in the middle. But it gets very complicated. There's no one rule for this because every single rule we said is only unless you're applying a different rule. It comes down to reading your opponent.
Yeah, it's actually like it gets pretty complex, and like it gets so convoluted and weird that like a lot of pros just like meme about it, and they're just like, all right, I'm just gonna roll a d6 because I don't care, just random it out.
Yeah,
Hey,
RDU has famously said that all random is the way to go.
I like Hoy's method of weighted random, where you roll like a d20 and you have a certain number. Well, I don't know that he necessarily rolls a d20, but essentially you have a set number. Like if you think that you want 60% chance that you are playing this deck, but also some chances that you're playing the other one, just so that, because what you don't want is for your opponent to have an edge, like I know that they're going to queue this deck specifically, and then they can use that against you. So I like weighted random so that you're very likely to play this deck, but your opponent doesn't know for sure because it might just be that you had a small chance to start with this other deck. Anyway,
Oh my god,
very
this is getting too complicated for
It's-
me.
yeah.
Welcome to
It's- we-
Conquest.
We have to go deeper.
And the other thing about UHL is that it started right after the brand new meta, like right after our new season started. And so you had no idea what the other person was bringing. Even if you knew they were bringing Shaman, Paladin, and Druid, that didn't tell you anything. You had no idea what the deck was, what cards were in it, like how they were going to play it 1 week into the meta. And you had to have all the cards for 9 different classes to each have a deck to play with 3 weeks into the meta. So that was interesting. And not being able to, replay classes is a thing in UHL. You're only allowed to play a class once, and then you can't play it again until you've played all the rest of the classes. Which makes it really interesting for the people who are watching, because it's not just going to be all of the same thing, over and over and over again. Like if Paladin's really popular, it's not like everyone's going to be playing Paladin all the time every game. So that makes it way more interesting for people to watch. But for the people playing, you have to learn every single class, at least one deck from them, and then also know all your matchups. So yeah, that was a big experience preparing for that and trying to learn all the decks and have all of the cards. Yeah.
Yeah, like
So-
for viewer experience, it's really great. But as a player at the beginning, it's like you're riding a bike and the ground's on fire and the bike's on fire and the air's on fire and everything's on fire.
I was
I
gonna
like
say,
it.
how's playing Priest, Eve? Since you said you're not much of a control player, I don't know that there's a whole lot of aggro priests out there.
I mean, Grant gave me Mind Blast Priest, but I had no clue how to play it. And I went up, like, my first matchup was against Control Warrior. I was
Oh
like,
god.
this doesn't seem like I have a way to win this game.
Correct.
Yeah, you'd
I'm
be right.
making the math in my head, and he's armoring up every turn, and I literally don't think there's a way I can win this game.
Eve, when it
And then
comes
I
to
talked to Rob
Priest,
afterwards. He's like, Eve, yes, there was a way you could have won it.
when it comes to Priest, do what I did. Say, I don't know what's going on. Here's a 2-drop. Let me just put this 2-drop in my deck. And just play it over and over again until my opponent dies. Because there's no real easy way to navigate that, but like Squashling solves everything. It's fine.
Squashling.
The real Priest 2-drop is Hero Power your opponent's face.
But the emote is different based on which hero you're using. It's very important. Anyways, to avoid yet another digression, we are 45 minutes into this episode and have not left the intro. So, Eve, would you like to do the remainder of a podcast with us?
Yeah.
Great.
Was that a choice?
It's,
I just like
I mean, listen.
I mean, you could just duck out of the Skype call now.
Yeah.
Just be like, whoop.
I didn't realize that's a thing that happened.
Well, we had discussed prior, and we got the pretty good vibe that you were going to stick around the whole time. But yes, you do have an end call button, and I can't stop you from using it. I hope you stay around. We'd very much like to have you.
I never
If you will
understand
have
why-
me, I will stay.
I never understand why this question is in the interview thing, but I haven't had the heart to ask Hat to remove it.
Okay, the first
Just
two
don't give
guests.
people the option hat. That's the trick.
The first
Don't
two guests
tell
we
them
had
they
on the
can
show left after the interview. That's a thing that happened. The first two guests we had were like, you're here for the interview, and then after the interview, you can go, and thanks. Because in Asmo, he was our first guest, and he was up at 2 in the morning, and then he had to go stream at 3 in the morning. So, of course, we're like, hey, the interview's over. Thanks so much for coming, and he bounced. So, listen, this is... Botticus, you got him on the show. This is your fault. That's why this question is here.
I just kind of figured, it's already predetermined how long they're gonna be here. Like they already know that he knew he was only staying for the interview part. Eve kind of knows that we plan to have her for the rest of the show. I thought that was kind of a given, but we can keep asking the question. I'm good with it.
We're doing a
Do
bit.
podcast?
We-
Nope.
We
It's
can
a
I would
bit.
like to leave now. Am I done?
we can keep coin conceding to people instead of giving shout outs. I'm in. Let's keep going.
Man, apparently I drain people's soul in UHL and then ask stupid questions on Coin Concede. All right, somebody else. Appa,
I'm
why
having
don't
so
you
much
talk
fun.
about
How
your ladder
you?
traps? Yeah, we're doing fine. We're doing fine. Let me just go sit in Ice Crown and contemplate my sword that eats people's lives. Appa, how are you doing on ladder?
Oh.
I'm doing all right. I'm hovering around like 4,000 right now. My win rate's not fantastic, but it's good enough to climb with enough games, and I'm planning for a finish this month. So I'm gonna be up all night and then tomorrow until 2 in the morning. So I'm just gonna keep grinding ladder till I get there.
And then you move on Friday.
Saturday actually.
Oh, so you have a day. You have a day in between.
Yeah, I got a day to sleep after playing Infinite Hearthstone.
Well, that's good. And what have you been playing? Did you mention that?
I've been playing a lot of Q Block. I started at like 5,000, and I'm up to like 4,000 right now with like a 58% win rate. Because when I lose to people in rank 1, and then my rank just plummets. And then I have to win like 2 to make up for that. But yeah, I'm playing Q Block right now. It's still real good.
Yeah, I've tried it a little bit and seen it a little bit, and the meta seems to be slowing down a bit, and charging Doom Guards are really good against, like, piles of Doom Guards are good against slower metas.
Yeah, people started shudderwalking me with Tempo Mage and like other stuff. And like I was getting healing rain, and I'm like, you know what? Skull of the Minare. Doomguard Cube Pact beat this, and then they didn't. They died.
Yeah, that works pretty well. How about you, Bot?
Also Mountain Giants.
Yeah,
Oh,
Mountain
yes.
Giants are real good.
Yeah.
I call them dome guards because that's where it goes, straight to the dome. 5 to the face. That's Q Block in a nutshell. I love it. So for me, I was in a similar position to Appa last Friday. I was like in the 4Ks and really struggling to find a deck until I found Miracle Rogue, maybe a deck you guys haven't heard of before. It's got this card called Gadgetzan Auctioneer, and that card's real good. And I had a 12-1 win streak to go from like 4K up to rank 900 something, and been kind of hovering around there. I fell back a little bit, but I've climbed back into the top 1K. Hopefully I have time tonight to climb a little higher. I'm not really expecting to have time to like really push for a top 200 finish, but if I have a really good win streak tonight, it could happen. I'd be pretty happy with a top 500 finish, honestly, just because I want to make sure I'm getting enough sleep because I'm going to Austin tomorrow and it resets at like midnight. So I'm like in a plane for a lot of the duration that I would normally be trying to play. And I'm also working all day tomorrow. So that'll be fun, but we'll see if I can get a reasonable finish.
Oh man, Austin. I forgot about Austin. That's awesome.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah. And Austin, for those that don't know, we'll talk about it in a little bit. That's Last Hero Standing, which is even more complicated than Conquest somehow. It's difficult. Eve, what have you been playing in ladder? What are you up to?
I've been playing Spell Hunter and Odd Rogue.
And how are you doing?
And I'm in rank 5 hell.
That'll happen. What have you seen in the rank 5 meta over the past few days? Like, has it evolved at all?
Like, that's what I mean. It feels like wild. Like, every single deck that I go up against is completely different, and people feel completely comfortable trying strange and wacky things because they're rank 5 and they can't fall down. So that's why people call it rank 5 hell. It's where people don't care. They're not going to fall anywhere. So they just, all of the things you watch Toast play on his stream is what you see at rank 5. And a lot of the time it works because you are not expecting it.
Yeah, I saw him playing a deck that I tried out a little bit, which is a Questless OTK Mage. And that deck is actually, like, not terrible. It's not good, but it's not terrible.
I mean, if everybody's playing decks that win the game at like turn 16, then you're probably gonna get your Exodia combo together by then.
Yeah, well, and against when Shutterwalk heals to 30, or when Warrior tanks up to 60, and you're like, I don't care. That's kind of nice. Or when Quest
whenever
Priest
they get
is a
around
real
90,
thing.
then you start playing StarCraft with your APMs.
Yeah, I think the fastest I ever saw a dog killed someone the last second when they were at, I think, 124 or something. But again, dog's APM is pretty spectacular. Yeah, but that's more than one action per second. So, no, way more. Yeah, that's dog's good at Hearthstone.
How many
Anyways.
APMs is that? Dog's good at Hearthstone.
It's not
Good
about the
coverage,
number.
yeah.
And then I am around rank 800 legend today. Bot actually watched me a little bit. I bounced up and down. I tried some Q block out, but I've been playing a good amount of Mr. Yagoot's Bubble Rogue, which is a tempo rogue, except it has a bunch of miracle cards, but it tops out with Argent Commander and double sprint, and it has no gadgets and auctioneer. And let me tell you, you know what's a good card? Sap. Sap is a really good card. Especially in this meta right now where everyone's playing big, slow, dumb things. You just get to sap people, and that's very enjoyable. So I've been doing pretty well with that, above 50% win rate, not by like a crazy amount, but I've also been trying out a bunch of different decks, including one that we will talk about in the decksplanations. All right. And since we've been very long-winded in the intro, let me just cut to the chase right here. We've got not a ton of news, but a little bit, and we want to make sure we find the time to talk about it. So, take it away, Bot.
So, as Hat said, we don't have a ton of news this week, and I do want to get through it quick because we had an awesome, fun interview, and also my internet decided to cut out, so already tons of fun stuff happening in this cast. But anyway, we have the first little article here is behind the scenes of HCT Playoffs from the Play Hearthstone website. Basically goes into preparation for kind of what players do to get ready for HCT. It's kind of a cool little article, pretty short here, but just goes into prep and kind of, says up on the big stage, all kind of stuff like that. Let's see. The next little note I have here is some of the standout decks post-nerf after a week has gone by. This is a HS Top Decks article. Kind of goes into a lot of the decks Appa and I talked about last week, actually, when we were going through the meta, and just kind of shows what all the decks that have done well now that a week has gone by and the meta is starting to solidify a little bit. So if you're looking for deck ideas, there are a ton of decks on this list. Just lots of options. If you're kind of bored with whatever you've been doing, there's a ton of just like really good win rate decks that you could play. Next up on the docket is, I saw this cool little article also on HS Top Decks about interesting Witchwood combos that you can do. My favorite one here is Ratcatcher plus Wrathguard. Now you might be asking, what the heck is Wrathguard? And let me tell you. So I believe it's a 6 mana 6/6. That at the end of your turn it deals 2 damage to all damaged minions, and so you have to like I don't know, it's something involving Bran Bronzebeard, Glinda Crowskin, summoning portals, and eating your own minions a bunch of times, and then you give them the you treachery a Wrathguard to them. Oh wait, okay, wrong card. Anyway, either way, I've seen it. Sorry, there's actually two different combos, but either way, this version you treachery a Wrathguard to them and hit them with a gigantic Ratcatcher to kill them. It's one of those combos that like takes up the whole turn. There's a little video that they have in here where you can see this thing going off. But it's pretty
for
cool.
clarity, Wrathguard is a 2 mana 4/3. Whenever it takes damage, your opponent also takes that much damage, or the person who controls it takes that much. So you just like make a gigantic Ratcatcher and nuke this Wrathguard, and then they die.
Yeah, I had it mixed up. I forgot what the other. I think there's another version that uses that 6 mana card I was talking about, that you like somehow donate it to them, and then I don't know. It deals a bunch of damage to it. Similar thing, but this is much cooler with the old Bran Bronzebeard and playing a bunch of Ratcatchers on themselves to like double and double and double, or just make it really big. Either way, I'm going on too long about this thing I don't know enough about. Uh, the next little item we have here is somehow I missed that we did not talk about this. It is the Tempo Storm, the History of Hearthstone tournament. It's basically a every week they add in a new set. So they started off where you had to just build decks with basic and classic cards, and then they added Nax and so on and so on. They have a few competitors here, kind of a nice mix of people. We have Danehearth, Zalay, Nyria, Just Sayin, Zixo, Ant, Jackie Chan, and Orange. Kind of a nice mix here. You get a couple of guys that are definitely not going to bring like whatever they consider like the highest top tier meta decks. Like there'll be a little bit of both, like some very competitive players and some people that are known a little bit more for memeing. And then it says that week 6 is going to be the finals with the top 4 playing out. Have any of you guys been able to catch any of this yet? This is something I really would like to go back and see some of the weeks, because the idea, I believe, is to kind of review past metas, even though you can't play with the cards how they were during that meta, but you can get a feel for kind of what it was like back when those sets were out.
Yeah, I haven't caught any of this, but I have wanted to, and I think they're uploading each week on the Tempo Storm YouTube channel. I forget which day they do it, but I think it's reserved for like Tuesday or Wednesday. They're uploading like every week, so I need to go back and watch those. But if you wanted to watch those without like digging through Twitch, that's a place to catch them.
Pat, did you get to catch any of this?
I didn't know this was happening until today, and I feel disappointed because I would have loved to see it. It will be, I think it's more a take of, now that we know what we know about how to build decks and about these metas, and we took out the most powerful offending cards in these metas, because the first 2 weeks that we saw are going to be almost unrecognizable from what Hearthstone was before, because if you look at an original Face Hunter list, I think Chalky said somewhere between 16 and 20 of the cards out of the 30 have been changed. And then we're missing Grim Patron, we're missing original Warsong Commander, where you could shove Mountain Giants to your opponent's face, or Molten Giants, opponent's face for 0. There's a lot of things that have changed, but it's still a really cool look back at how differently cards were designed and what we know about how cards interact now that we really didn't when the game was younger. Because this was back when Firebat won Worlds with, I think, 1 copy of Force in his mid-range Druid deck. Because that a lot of people just put 1 copy of Force of Nature in, because why would you ever play 2? And it's just interesting kind of seeing the perspective that we have on it now. So I'm dying to go back and watch it. I'm sorry to everyone that we didn't bring this up sooner. I don't know how we missed it, but I'm definitely going to go back and watch it, and y'all should too.
Yeah, I'm ready to go back and watch and see lots and lots of Chillwind Yetis facing each other.
Until Piloted Shredder was released the next week in this particular format.
Yeah.
And Sludge Belcher, which was also known to be a good card.
Yeah, that card's sweet.
Man,
Are you gonna? You think you're gonna have time to check this out, Eve?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, it sounds really cool. I definitely want to go take a look at it.
Awesome. So last couple notes here. Tickets to see HCT Summer Champs are on sale now. They're $20 for day 1, $30 for day 2. They're going to be held in the sports arena down here in Anaheim. I'm not sure if I'm going to be going to this, but I might look into it. We have a link in there if you want to get tickets. And then the last note we have is a 5th birthday. Happy 5th birthday to HearthPwn. Kind of awesome that they've been doing this as long as they have. Definitely a great site to find out a lot of information. This is usually my go-to whenever like new cards are being released. I like to go here and see some of them.
Speaking of birthdays, fellow podcast actually had their first birthday this past week. Tier 5, they just had their like year anniversary episode this week. So
episode 52.
Just wanted to put that in the news.
Yeah, I actually listened to that today, and I heard somebody on this podcast might have had a little segment in there. And also, Craig of Canada is a treasure. He is amazing. That's all I gotta say.
He's
about
a
that.
musical man.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely go if you haven't checked out Tier 5 before. This is definitely an episode you want to check out because
Not safe for work.
Not safe
yeah.
for children.
Yes.
It's if you
Not
have to
safe
watch
for
your
work,
salt
but-
intake, consult a doctor before listening to Tier 5.
And that's
Yeah.
all for the news.
Cool. Well then, we do have a tournament this week, and it's a fun one, so let's talk about it.
It's the grand tournament.
And this week we have the Titan AR Invitational Tournament. 16-player Invitational Tournament held. It's not in China, but by NetEase, which is the company that runs Hearthstone in China, and it was run on Chinese time. Dr. J and Nostum casted this at God knows what hour of the morning. I think it was 3 or 4 a.m. is when it got started Eastern time, so... Whew. Yeah, so everyone was playing on China time, and every single player involved had to submit their deck list before the nerfs went live, but it was played post-nerf. So this is 100% an exercise in theory crafting. There was not a single game played with these cards in the format that these players got to play with. It was pretty cool to see. Tournament was last hero standing, much like DreamHack Austin's going to be, and completely different from what we talked about with Conquest formats earlier in this podcast. Last hero standing. So with Conquest, you have to win with each deck, and when you win with each deck, you stop playing it. And you have to play until one player wins with all their decks. With Last Hero Standing, you play until one player loses with all their decks. And if you play a deck and win with it, your opponent's deck is knocked out, and you have to keep playing the same deck. So it's very different because the player that you just beat knows what you're going to play, as opposed to Conquest where they really don't. So, completely different format and lineups. It was split into 4 different groups, and the top 2 from each group ended up in single limb top 8, and that got played out. Our buddy Hearthstone Orange, HS Orange, took the championship over Shao-Ti, Royal Baize, and Pavel, top 4. Great showing from both of them. Muzzy, Jason Joe, Omega Zero, and RDU were in the top 8. And then LVGE, Shusheng, X-Hope, Zixo, Sleeping, Tom60229, Mage, and Shizuo, I probably pronounced that horribly, did not make the cut to top 8. But a really great list of players. If you look at the tournament meta here, now keep in mind, every single deck that was submitted for this tournament was not played for 1 second in the meta it was actually going to be relevant in. So this is all theory crafted. And it looked pretty interesting. Mage was actually the most represented deck. There were 5 big spell mages, 4 Alaneth aggro mages, and 2 freeze mages. Priest was next. There were 9 Mind Blast priests. 9 blasts. No other decks. No other priest decks. Just this one. Probably the safest bring because there was least likely to be any kind of change as to... well, obviously no changes to the cards in the deck, but least likely to change in the mechanism in which it attacked other decks. It ended up working out okay. There were 6 control warlocks, 1 cube, and 1 even warlock. 1 player got even warlock predicted correctly. For Druid, 5 people still brought Spiteful Druid. 2 brought Token, and 1 brought Taunt. Muzzy has been known for bringing Token Druid to these tournaments. He even brought it before the nerfs, and the deck is still pretty powerful. As far as Paladin, this probably took the biggest hit from what people were expecting. There were only 7 Paladins out of 16, 4 Murlocs, 3 odds. Warrior, there were 2 odd, 2 taunt, and 2 big recruit warriors, so a pretty good variety there. For Rogue, there were 3 odds, 2 miracles, and still a quest. Hunter, there were 6 spell hunters and no other archetypes represented, and then Shaman was still the least represented. There were 2 even shamans and 1 Shutterwalk. The winning lineup ended up being Spell Hunter, Big Mage, Control Priest, and Recruit Warrior. So you take a look at that, it actually is... There were a lot of good guesses here, early but good guesses about what the meta was going to look like and what decks were going to perform. And I think it's pretty impressive to see Token Druid is represented here, even Warlock is represented here, Big Spell Mage is very well represented, Spell Hunter, and a bunch of Warrior decks. I think that a lot of these players were in tune with the mechanism in which the previous meta operated and were able to make predictions about where it was going to course correct. Now, as far as games to watch here, there were a couple I'm going to bring up. First was Baize versus Shusheng. This is game number 3 in their series. Baize was playing Alaneth Tempo Mage, and Shusheng was playing Control Mage. Now, normally, this is a bad matchup for Control Mage because Tempo Mage kind of dictates the pace of the game. But it's not normal for Control Mage to be on 28 life on turn 6. And it's not normal before that for the Tempo Mage to have no board whatsoever and then coin out Alaneth on 5 anyway, when their opponent's on full health. But that's what Baize did. Baize said, it's turn 5, I'm coining out this Alaneth, my opponent is ahead on board, ahead on life, and I don't care. And she wasn't able to empty her hand every turn. She did, in fact, burn cards, including a Frostbolt, which was pretty important, way behind in terms of pressure. But she was able to line up her life total, her own fatigue, and her opponent's life total in a breathtakingly precise way, to the point where she had to life drink her the last turn she was alive with a counterspell up to make sure she didn't fatigue out by 2 points of life, and then was able to kill her opponent with a precise Pyroblast. Even the casters couldn't believe it until the last turn of the game, and it was really, really impressive to watch. So, the finish was unbelievable. I would definitely recommend going to check it out, because watching the precise decision trees here in a very unorthodox play, where Baize's opponent had Gluttonous Ooze the first turn that Baize had Alaneth down, and chose not to play it, because he was going for the fatigue plan, and it backfired on him in the very last turn. It was really, really incredible.
When you have the chance to counter your opponent's 18 for 1, and you don't, that seems like a mistake.
And within the context of the game at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do, but in retrospect, yes. Maybe the card that lets you draw an extra 18 cards should probably go away. Anyways, good point up. I'd recommend watching this game because it swings back and forth so excellently. I was watching it live and I nearly fell out of, well, I was in bed because it was 4 in the morning. But I nearly fell out of bed. And then this other game was recommended to us by Steven Sensei, a longtime listener. It was RDU versus Tom 60229 Game 3. And this is a more typical finish. It was RDU's Murloc Paladin versus Tom's Tempo Mage. It's not a good matchup for Tempo Mage. Tempo Mage usually can't really defend the board that well, can't deal with early wide boards and early aggression. But the reason that I recommend watching this game is because of the micro decisions. Is because there was a turn where RDU played into a secret that he suspected was Explosive Runes, and he had Rockpool Hunter, Knife Juggler, Murloc Tidecaller, and chose to play the Rockpool Hunter first, just to get an extra point of life against the Explosive Trap, even though he missed 1 point of buffing the attack on the Tidecaller and 1 dagger from the Knife Juggler. Even though that happened, he still made the call of, the only way I lose to some freak amount of burn spells, the 1 life point matters when I'm so far ahead. And there were a lot of those micro decisions throughout the entire game, and RDU had the perfect read on Tom's secrets a couple times. Tom was still able to kind of develop while playing for board and removing things, even though he was under a lot of pressure and had an extra burn spell that would have done something. It's worth checking out, even though the result is the same as we would normally expect. I think the way that we got there was profoundly interesting, and would recommend checking it out just to see where these players gain these small edges in these games and then maybe find ways to get them back. Did any of the 3 of you fine folks manage to watch any TITANAR?
Nope.
That's 3
Sorry.
no's. It's okay. It was on at bizarre times, and I couldn't even find the VODs on YouTube. I found 1 VOD in Mandarin, and that was the only one I found of 1 match. So it's linked in the show notes on Twitch. If you want to see it, move quickly because it might be archived after 30 days. But what won't be archived in 30 days is next weekend in DreamHack Austin. We're all very excited, especially Botticus because he gets to go. And then the week after that is HCT Seoul, which is the next major HCT tour stop. Yay.
Yeah. I can't wait. I'll be, as Het said, I'll be at DreamHack Austin on Friday. I'll be wearing my Concede shirt. So if you see me, please come say hi. Unless I'm in the middle of a match, and then wait till I'm done, and then say hi. But yeah, I want to meet any listeners that are out there. I'm really excited. It's going to be my first major tournament. Appa has crafted a juicy lineup for me, and I'm excited to see how it goes. Seems like it's pretty well positioned. So
Basically the juiciest.
yeah. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited to get in some tournament games of Hearthstone. I think I have a solid idea what I need to do, and based on testing, feels like I'm pretty well positioned.
All right. Well, that tournaments. Let's go on to our decksplanations, and yes, that's what we're calling it this week.
So this week, since we haven't actually dove into a specific deck archetype in a while, we've just like kind of been covering general metagame stuff. We're actually going to talk about Token Druid, because it's one of the most intriguing decks in like how it's built that I've seen in a while. And I had a coaching last week where the person I was coaching, they were playing Token Druid, and I actually haven't played a game with it. And I was like, okay, I could probably coach this. This is no problem. And then he started playing, and I'm like, oh, this is not like old Token Druid at all. This is not an aggro deck. It's because it's a token Druid deck with like Nourish and Ultimate Infestation, like Spreading Plague and stuff. And it's like really light on threats, but somehow you just like Whispering Woods for 7 and then Soul the Forest it, and then your opponent can't win anymore, like in the mid game. It's so bizarre. So we really wanted to kind of break it down a little bit, because it's really counterintuitive in like a lot of the ways that it plays. And it really started showing prominence after Muzzy brought it to the America's Playoffs. And it's been built a little bit different. His had a lot less like action in it. He was really relying on like the Spreading Plagues and the Whispering Woods, but now people are building it with like Violet Teachers and all that kind of stuff, but we'll get into that in a minute. The deck is kind of built in a way that, I mean, most Druid decks are built. It's like ramp early, ramp with like Wild Growth and Nourish, and then kind of refuel later if you need to with Branching Paths or Ultimate Infestation. And then there's a point in the game where you want to make a wide board and then cast Soul of the Forest on it. So if it's against aggro, you want Spreading Plague and Soul of the Forest, and if it's against control, you want enough cards in your hand where Whispering Woods is good, and then you staple Soul of the Forest to it, and most decks can't beat that. And then you have 2 Savage Roars and 2 Branching Paths to hit your opponent for a lot. So that's kind of what the deck is like in general, and it sees really good win rates against aggro because Spreading Plague is a very nutty card. And it sees good win rates against non-warrior, non-warlock slow decks, because they have Warpath, Defile, and Lord Godfrey, which deal with 1/1s with 2/2s stapled to them as a death rattle fairly easily, but a lot of decks have trouble clearing that board. Like Mage, all of its, like Big Spell Mage, it has like Blizzard and Flame Strike, and then that's only 1/2 of the board. And then Shaman has like Volcano, and that's only 1/2 of the board, or like Lightning Storm. Hunter has to have like Unleash the Hounds and Explosive Trap. But yeah, that's kind of what the deck does. And I've kind of passed it off to Botticus a little bit here, because he's played the deck more than I have in preparation for testing for Austin. So I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, so basically the two ways I've seen it built are there's kind of the Ironwood Golem and Arcane Tyrant version that obviously you have kind of your Whispering Woods and Spreading Plague option to go wide, and then but also sometimes when you're ramping like with a Nourish or when you are refilling with a UI, being able to dump your hand with Arcane Tyrants can be useful. I'm not as big of a fan of this this version of the deck because the Ironwood Golem and while it's like a really solid card, that and the Arcane Tyrant just feel a little bit out of place to me. They just kind of are just good statted minions in a deck that's really trying to do its one thing, I feel like, which is make a wide board, make it sticky, and then hit them for a bunch with the Savage Roar. So I'm much more of a fan of the version that plays Living Mana and Greedy Sprite, because Living Mana gives you extra options to be able to go wide. Some of the decks have like multiple ways to clear wide boards, but having essentially twice as many of the go wide cards as when you just have Whispering Woods, because a lot of the decks that are trying to clear your board, the Spreading Plagues are not very good. That's kind of why I prefer the Living Mana version. Also, the fact that Priest is not quite as popular and rogues with Vanish in their deck are not quite as popular makes me like Living Mana a bit more. But that's just kind of my opinion, and it looks like stats are showing most people are preferring the Arcane Tyrant version. I just felt like a lot of the removal lines up better against cards just like a couple good statted minions instead of just obviously like Living Mana Rogue just can't deal without a Vanish. So that's kind of where I've been at with it. That's the version I'm actually taking to DreamHack, is one with Living Mana, and it was only playing one Violet Teacher because that card has been fairly underwhelming for me. It doesn't ever feel like it gets out of hand, or it's very, very rare that it ever gets out of hand. So I'm only playing one, and then the Greedy Sprites go obviously really well with the Living Mana because it helps you get your crystals to get rid of all of them to make a bunch of 2/2s.
Yeah, the version with the Arcane Tyrants and like the teachers and golems and stuff, it feels like there's just like this shell of a really powerful Token Druid, and then there's just like these cards that are just slapped in there because like they're reasonable and you can play them pretty easily.
Yeah, like these cards are good, so
It's like they don't advance your
deck.
game plan like too much, but there's games where you just like Ultimate Infestation, Double Tyrant, and then it feels really, really gross.
Yeah, but also there's also been some decks that are playing Injured Blademaster, so that hopefully you pull it out with your 4 mana spell that gains you 6 armor and pulls it out, and then it pulls it out as a 4/7, which it's like, okay, yeah, that's like pretty good. That's a decent high roll, but then also you just draw Injured Blademaster sometimes.
Yeah,
and you play a 3
whenever
mana 4/3, and it's like
whenever we were discussing like the token builds, whenever we were going through Botticus's lineup, we were talking about this recruit Token Druid, and I was talking about how I played against a guy who guy or girl, a person. I played against somebody who God, what's the recruit card? Oaken Summons. They Oaken Summons out a Blademaster on 3 with coin, and then I was like, okay, that's like your best case scenario. That's just a stupid 4/7. I don't care. I'm just gonna make giant cubes, and then like killed that, and then they like drew the other one later, and I'm like, oh no, you're not winning this one, buddy. They just played a 3 mana 4/3, and I was like, okay, this one's just over. So like, I don't know, like the best possible draws with like the recruit cards, I don't know, like they just don't impress me as much.
Yeah, I saw an Injured Blademaster once and I was super confused. I was like, are they playing like Healing Touch? Like what are they doing to this thing to make it good? And it's like, oh, just sometimes you can possibly get it with Oaken Summons. It just doesn't feel worth it to me.
Well, Oaken
But-
Summons or Guild Recruiter, Q have.
Oh yeah.
Join
the
guild.
I just watched
have cookies.
Red Knight play this against Pear in UHL, like right before I came on the show. And he had the one with Oaken Summons and Injured Blade Master. He got pretty badly swept by the Warrior, which is expected.
Yeah.
But Rogue had no chance against him.
Yeah,
Like,
Rogue
there
is
was-
not
yeah.
not very good against this deck. Like you have sometimes you have a couple Fan of Knives. A lot of times they're not that useful.
Yeah. But the Violet teacher seemed to be more like a lightning rod than anything else. Like you said, it wasn't getting a whole lot of value, even with all the things he was doing with it. And so it was just kind of this scary thing that people feel like they need to remove before it gets out of control. So I think that's kind of how it was functioning in the deck. But yeah, Lesser Jasper Spellstone, that's in yours as well.
Yep. That card's just really solid. I mean, it's one mana removal that has potential to kill something real big is quite good. Yeah, it's just I felt like with Violet Teacher, in order to get it out, you usually had to use coin, and the ideal situation is you play Violet Teacher and then you play coin and then you play a 1-mana spell. But even then you get like 2 tokens, which is not that exciting. And then next turn you might play 2 more spells if it didn't die, and you get 2 more tokens, and it feels really slow, and those tokens are pretty easy. It's very rare that you get to like Violet Teacher, play a couple spells, and then play Power of the Wild to buff everything to 2/2s. Like that happens it feels like it happens very infrequently. I don't know that is like the fact of the matter, but it just it doesn't seem like the most worthy inclusion, which is why I cut down, or I was only playing 1 in the deck. But Hat might have some different opinions. I'm interested to hear what Hat says about this deck, what he's been playing with it.
So the first thing that I've learned about this deck is that it's weird, and it's a one-trick pony, right? Like you can squeak out games. I was coaching actually my girlfriend yesterday. We were against a stupid priest that kept trying to clear our board. Because priests are stupid. It's a fact. Sorry, Eve. No, I'm not. I'm not sorry even a little bit. But and priest is a terrible matchup for this deck because you buff your minions, then they psychic scream them, or they wild pyro them, or they do whatever priests do and wipe the board over and over again. But our opponent was at 16 and made the mistake of leaving up 1. It was a single scarab. 1 scarab, and we were Malfurion. And they were at 16, and so I believe I had buffed it with Power of the Wild once. It was a 2/6. And so Savage Roar, Branching Paths, Swipe. Yeah, I had an Innervate. And they were dead. They died. And that's the sort of thing that can happen because this format seems to be predicated mostly on how do you deal with the mild amount of aggression that's around? How do you stabilize the mid game? And then how do you put together kind of your big haymaker punch? And the thing about Token Druid is that it can kind of put that punch together out of nowhere. Because a small board with chip damage, especially with Malfurion involved, and then 2 Savage Roars, is a lot of damage out of nowhere. And so it doesn't just have to be Whispering Woods for 7, Soul of the Forest, go, next turn you die, take 40. Though that works a lot. A lot. Works against everything that's not Warpath, Psychic Scream, Defile, Godfrey, Pyromancer. Against just those things. Otherwise, you can generally depend on that, but you don't have to wait that long. Because sometimes your opponent goes wide a little bit, and then you Spreading Plague for 3 or 4 Scarabs, and then your opponent dies. Or sometimes you've got a Violet Teacher, which I found to be pretty effective. You save your Oaken Summons in this deck when you build the Violet Teacher build, and you save that for like turn 6-ish, or turn 7, and then you can go Oaken Summons and a Coin or an Innervate and play a Wrath, or play a Spellstone into a Power of the Wild, or something like that. And it still generates a decent enough board that you're able to contest, and you do draw out that removal. but sometimes you just win there. You just make a board that has 3 or 4 minions, and then you punch your opponent in the face really hard the next turn. They're not expecting it. Because the surprise burst, I think, is really the defining characteristic of this deck. It's very light on threats, and so you have to play as though you need those threats to stick. But Violet Teacher kind of defies that because you almost expect to die, like Eve was saying. But it doesn't have to. And then when it doesn't, you usually win. And so you save it to the point where it can generate a few additional threats to build up that chip damage. Now, it sounds like Botticus build is more about a little bit of chip damage earlier, and then you play a better mid-game threat like Living Mana, which I've seen a couple times. Because even if you clear the Living Mana, it's 1 card, and if you don't, then you die. So, like, I get it.
Yeah, the Innervates plus Violet Teachers make a lot of sense. Obviously, that makes Violet Teacher much more effective. And what I was going to say is another thing you can do a lot of times with this deck is you'll set up your board. They'll get to the point where they're like, okay, I'm going to take a bunch of damage next turn, but I'll survive. And you just like do a ton of damage to them, and then next turn you double swipe their face because they have to remove your board and try to heal, and usually they can't do both of those things. So that's just another like avenue to victory with this deck. Is you don't always have to be like, okay, the Savage Roar isn't lethal, I shouldn't do it. Sometimes you just Savage Roar and deal them 20 damage, and then you're like, okay, now you still have to clear this board and heal, or they just end up dying to not being able to do both at the same time.
Something I've learned by playing Savage Roar and Bloodlust a ton is even if it's not lethal, if this is the maximum amount of damage you're getting out of a Savage Roar this game, just play it. If it doesn't kill him, if it gets him to like 9, just play it. And Savage Roar probably did like 14. And that's okay. It's okay that they're not dead yet. They're going to be dead real soon.
Or you weren't winning regardless because that Savage Roar was not going to do any more damage the next turn. So
I wanted to go back and touch on kind of the Violet Teacher thing real quick. I think it's kind of weird in Botticus's build because we have the greedy sprites too, and usually the Violet Teacher's versions also play Ironwood Golem, and the way
not in that one.
Yeah, the build that I'm running, it doesn't
have
have
an Ironwood Golem in it.
Yeah, the build I'm running doesn't have Ironwood Golem at all. Just has 2 Violet Teachers, nothing else below 4.
Okay, a lot of lists I've seen have gone 2 Teachers, 1 Golem, but I mean you can just cut the Golem. That's also acceptable.
Injure Blade Master.
But the way that it's built in like decks with Greedy Sprite is you want to Oaken Summons on 4 to be able to pull out the Greedy Sprite, because at that point it's like 4 mana, gain 6, upgrade a Spellstone, gain a Mana Crystal, and then it's just like really sick. So the extra Violet Teacher kind of makes those plays weird, because sometimes we'll just Oaken Summons on 4 and then pull out a Violet Teacher, and then it just feels like it does nothing because it'll just get immediately killed, not generate value. So I think that could be kind of where me and Bot are coming from on this, because we do have the Greedy Sprites and we just want to like Oaken Summons on 4, and sometimes you get the Teacher. So I think there might be, I think seeing like that kind of play pattern might be influencing our opinion on the card in the deck.
If I could put my 2 cents in after watching the game played once, it kind of makes me feel like the tokens are ruining your opponent's game plan because they see them and they're scared of them and they feel like they have to remove them. So it's kind of the same thing with Paladin, where like you see any Paladin tokens and you're like, those are suddenly going to become 4/4s or 3/3s. I have to take the time to remove them. And so it's messing up their own game plan, especially if they're aggro, where it's like, instead of hitting you in the face, I feel like I have to take the time to remove this 5 health Violet Teacher, which might take 2 minions and also my weapon. So it's not so much, am I going to do a bunch of face damage with these 1/1s, but you are throwing off your opponent who is like, I can't let him keep this board. Every time he makes a board, I have to remove it. I have to do something to it. And that also helps your end game plan. And then sometimes they do stick and you do buff them up and you get face damage. But it gives you like more of a game plan than in 1 turn, I'm going to get this big board and buff it up and then make it impossible for you to win. There's other things you can do while you're getting there.
TLDR, Violet Teacher is spooky. People get scared.
Yeah.
Well, we have this feeling of like we remember what Aggro Shaman was back in the day, where they all of a sudden had this massive board and they buffed it all up and there was nothing you could do. So anytime we hear the words Aggro Shaman, we're like, oh, just get rid of all the things. Don't let them have any tokens. Don't let them have any board ever. And there's no time where we can just ignore them and go face.
Yep, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I mean, in this meta, Violet Teacher can get punished as well more than most, because if you run into a lot of mirror matches and you make a bunch of 1/1s prematurely, sometimes they spreading play you and then you lose. So this meta still has a decent amount of AoE as well. Violet Teacher is actually like, against some matchups, it doesn't even matter. Against Big Spell Mage, for example, you don't even have to play it, because the way you beat Big Spell Mage is all of their board clears cost more than the amount of mana they have available in the turn. So the first big board you make, they double Dragon's Fury, then you make a second big board, and then they die. But Violet Teacher just eats one of those board clears and otherwise is irrelevant, because it's never going to deal enough damage at once. You burst them down, and any of the matchups where you burst them down from late game from a high life total, Teacher is largely irrelevant unless you kind of steal a win with it in the meantime. Now, I don't know if Greedy Sprite would matter any more in those matchups, and I don't know if Living Mana would matter more in those matchups. I think that's the question of where, and Bot, you might be able to speak to this, where do you gain the advantage by switching to the Living Mana Sprite build?
To me, it just felt like a more consistent game plan where I'm not ever like going for the mid-sized minions. I'm just going for ramping my mana as it's as efficiently as possible in Druid nowadays. I don't think there's any other cards that actually ramp your mana. So it has basically every ramp card, and then you have the maximum number of go wide cards with cards that buff your go wide cards. So like I believe a lot of versions are no longer playing Power of the Wild that are going for like this mid-game minion type thing. So my version obviously is trying to Power of the Wild your living manas, and so you just have a more consistent one note, right? Because you said that this deck is essentially just one. It does one thing. It's a one trick, but the trick that it does is pretty darn good when it works. So I just want to do that trick as consistently as possible.
Bot's builds is very predicated around dumping the dudes onto the board, looking your opponent straight in the eye and telling them you won't. And a lot of the time they can't.
Yeah.
So it's built to do that in as many games as possible.
Yeah. And do it multiple times, because like sometimes they do, but then you say, no, you don't the second time, and then they don't, and then you win, and it's great. That's the plan.
Now, have we all been seeing this deck a lot on the ladder? On Legend Ladder, I've definitely seen some peaks and valleys where some days there's a lot more of it, some days there's a lot less. Eve, have you seen it a lot hovering around? Well, you've seen everything in Rank 5 Hell, but how often have you seen this deck or variants thereof?
Yeah, the variants are, it's like people are trying to learn it and trying to figure out, like through our conversation, what's the best. I have seen a couple of different builds, and the first time I saw Injured Blade Master, I was very confused as well. What is this doing in a Druid deck? What is the point? But after watching Red Knight play it, I was like, okay, in the hands of a master, this is what it looks like. This is how it's supposed to play. And so that allowed me to see a lot more what you could do with the deck, and it was very interesting.
It also doesn't help that there's like 18 different Druid decks that are all like semi-competitively viable on ladder now, because you have Twig Mally Druid, and then Twig Togwaggle Druid, and then you have
The
Jungle Giants Mally Druid, and even like there's Taunt Druid, and then Devil Sword Druid, and these multiple different variations of Token Druid, and it's just like it doesn't feel like I see this deck as much just because but I see a ton of Druid just because there's so many different variations, and it makes it really hard to play against on ladder, because who knows like whether you're supposed to keep Skulking Geist, because against a lot of the Druid decks, Skulking Geist is really good, but it's totally useless against the token deck.
Surprise! We're in a Hearthstone meta where Druid's good.
But way better than just one Druid, which is Jade Druid and all Druid all the time. This is much better.
Yes, at least there's a variation to it. And I do want to bring up this thing since I'm talking about the different Druid decks. I got really excited yesterday because they cast a UI. They had to overdraw one card. That one card was Togwaggle, and I still lost.
Excuse me?
Oh yeah.
Wait, what?
I was playing Q Block, and I could not find my Acidic Swamp Ooze. So I got my Rin going, and so they Azelina'd me, attacked with their weapon, and then played the second part to the quest, and then the next turn they destroyed my deck, and I did not have Gul'dan in hand yet because I was trying to play around their naturalizes because I kept like not being able to tap because I couldn't get my hand size small enough. So they just did that, and then
if you guys listen to the last episode of Valen's Chosen, Grant goes over like 4 different win conditions for that deck, and only one of them includes Togwaggle.
And then I also lost to Malagos Druid, where they got to 9 mana, they got to their last charge of the weapon, and I oozed it, and I was like, yeah, suck on that. And then they played Malagos, and I was like, oh, I can't kill that.
That's got a big butt.
They went Malagos, Innervate, Blood Mage, Thalanos, Moonfire you, Moonfire you. And I was like, okay, well, I can't kill that Malagos. And the next turn they swiped me and killed me. And I was like, oh, all right. So that was, I thought I had this. I was like, I got the perfect answer to your stupid weapon. And then they're like, yeah, you don't have a Siphon Soul, so you're dead.
Yeah, Zamos has been rank 1 legend with that Twig Mally Druid for a little while now. And also, I think we can safely say none of us expected Rummaging Kobold to be in a rank 1 legend deck. But sometimes they just go... Yeah, if you don't know what that card is, that's the 3-mana 1/3 epic that Battlecry, you get back a destroyed weapon from that game to your hand. So you break the twig, they get a new twig. They retwig.
Does it play 2 so that you can play a twig and then the next turn play another twig to break the twig to get 6 extra mana for that turn?
That would be cool. It does not do that. I like where your heart's at. I like where your head's at. It doesn't do any of those things. It just gets the twig back. In case you break the twig, so you have a second chance. Because no one plays 2 weapon destruction cards in this meta. Everyone plays 1 or none, but nobody plays 2. So you just get to retwig if you need to do a bunch of burst damage. Because for those listening, what that lets you do is you get to go Malagos, and then you get to attack with the twig and get 10 mana back, and you get to faceless the Mally, and then you get to go Moonfire, Swipe, and that's 6 plus 30. 36. So 36 damage, typically more than 30 life. If your opponent is Quest Priest, they might not die, because they might be at 40, and I think it's fascinating that I have to say that because Quest Priest is a real deck. It's actually a deck people are playing, and I lost my THL match this week when my opponent went turn 8, play the Priest Quest reward, and then Zola it, and then I just bottom righted as fast as I could because my time has more value than that.
I need to get a t-shirt now with Hat's face on it that says 36 is typically more than 30.
I ran the numbers. I counted it out. It is more.
Typically. It's usually more. Sometimes
except
it's not
for
more than 30.
Except for extremely large values of 30. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Have you guys seen this priest deck which has like the card in it that makes 1/1 copies of cards?
Twilight's Call or Vivid
brings back
Nightmare?
1/1 and then has like multiple 1/1 Malagoses?
Yes.
Yes.
And then hits you in the face with a bunch of small spells that are now not small spells.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's at rank 5 too. That's a lot of fun.
We call that Grandmasta Blasta Priest.
Oh boy. It if I was wearing a hat right now, I would take it off in respect. I'm writing
hat
that
is
down.
not wearing a hat? This is a travesty.
It's in rank 5. Anything is possible, Eve. I'm writing that down for title of the episode.
It's beautiful, Botticus. It was beautiful.
It's
You brought a
previous
tear to my eye.
previous
Had to
working
tie it all
title.
in.
Previous working title of the episode was Hat Might Be Pregnant. Now it's been replaced by Grandmasta Blasta. Yeah, it's Fina was actually trying that out because you get to like use the priest spellstone to bring back a bunch of copies of Velen, and you get to like Vivid Nightmare it and Servitude it and make like multiple Velens and multiple Mind Blasts. And that's what this meta is kind of all about, right? Is that there's so many slow grindy value decks that if your slow grindy value deck also has a giant combo finish, that you probably beat the regular slow grindy value decks. So we see opportunity for things like Shutterwalk and things like, well, Quest Priest is the ultimate grindy value deck, and it's kind of why regular Control Priest has gone down, because Mind Blast don't cross the finish line that often, and why you have to deal 36 to your opponent in order to end the game. It's a really fascinating meta. But anyways, back to Token Druid real quick. From what
Do I get to find out why you're pregnant?
We talked about how my habits as a gamer are the same as yours when you were with a newborn.
Okay, all right, yes,
Yeah,
all right. That's
Eve-
just better
Grandmaster
than
Blast was way better.
Yes, I agree. That's why it was working title. And Eve, I hate to break it to you, I'm not pregnant.
Dang, I was real excited there for a minute. Thought you were trying to slip that in.
No, I don't know how possible it is, and I'm not going to dig into the details there. Anyways, what's important here is that in order to beat Token Druid, we want to make sure we go over how you beat Token Druid. The first and the easiest way to beat Token Druid is blow up their board twice in one turn. That's the easiest. Taunt Warrior, real good at this. You can play Warpath 3 times, and that usually does it if they have Scarabs, Spreading Plague Scarabs. You can Brawl, and then you can Warpath a couple times, or something like that. If you are Warlock, pop exactly one of their Wisps, and then Defile, because the other Wisp will blow up, and then that first 2/2 will blow up, and then the other 2/2s all blow up. Or you can just play Lord Godfrey, and Lord Godfrey is really good at doing all that for you. You don't have to worry about anything. Or if you're Priest, you can Psychic Scream it, or play Wild Pyro and 3 spells, and that's usually enough. These are the easy things. But you think about the game plan that Token Druid has. Step 1, survive. Step 2, make a wide board that can't be cleared, and Step 3, burst you down. So all you have to do is disrupt any of those things. If you can keep them from surviving, that means you have to have a really, really fast opening, but that can happen. Play around Spreading Plague, play around Spreading Plague, and play around Spreading Plague. Because if you go super wide with Fireflies and don't trade them off before they have 6 mana, you will lose to the giant wall of Scarabs. You can disrupt the wide board, or you can set your life total high enough that they can't burst you down. Be warned, this is a very big number. I would say that if your life total is below 50, you can't really deal with the full damage Savage Roar, Branching Paths burst, because I killed a mage on stream last week when playing Token Druid. I think they were at literally 50, but I did, with a 7 minion board, Savage Roar, Branching Paths, and that's an extra 6 damage per minion, plus the 4 from the face. So that's 7 plus 42 plus 4, that's 53. So again, if your life total is below that, don't expect to survive the big burst turn. So just be aware of that.
Each Savage Roar with a full board is 16 damage.
Yeah, it's nutter butters. So be aware that yeah, go ahead, Bot.
I was gonna say also for the decks that don't have like large amounts of AoE, say like you only have 1 AoE, it's really important to be ahead-ish on board. You obviously don't want to go too wide because you don't want to make their Spreading Plague into an extra Whispering Woods. But if you can be ahead enough on board where you can remove some of their minions and then remove their second set of Soul of the Forest, that's like a way that I've won the big spell mage matchup, is just have enough creatures that you can kind of push through their minions and then cast one big AoE, you take a bunch of damage, and then you AoE them again and can get there. Or just get Lich King off of Stonehill Defender and get an extra like Death and Decay, and that works pretty good too.
Good call.
Simple, right?
Yeah. It's so easy a turtle can do it. All right. Anything else to
What do you
add?
say about turtles?
I am not judging.
Stonehill Defender is a turtle.
It's true. I mean no denigration to our value-based slow friends. Slow is in speed. As in, turtles don't walk very fast. You know, the tortoise nets. Moving on. Let's go to the outro here. Let's hit it.
How long can this go on?
That was the wrong bumper. It'll work fine for today, and I'll edit this. It's no big deal. All right, so thank you to a bunch of people. Start off by saying thanks to Stefan L for letting us use his cover. Check him out in his channel, linked in the show notes. Big thanks to Hearthstone Top Decks and BeerBrick.com for Decklists, Hearthstone Tournaments on YouTube for tournament VODs, HearthPwn for their tournament analyses, Old Guardian for his tournament analyses. You can find the show notes for this week's episode on our website at CoinConcede.com. You can support our show at Patreon.com/CoinConcede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at Twitch.tv/CoinConcedepodcast. Join our community chats and our Discord at Discord.CoinConcede.com. Write into our email at CoinConcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at CoinConcede. If you'd like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Calum, Viriatus, and...
It's so fluffy!
Fluffy. Big props to Swagoa Gaming. We've partnered with them for a little bit recently. They're going to have their monthly member tournament coming up soon, so keep your ears peeled for that. And then we're going to play a little bumper here. It's a little on the longer side. Con Before the Storm, for those that are unfamiliar, the night before BlizzCon, Ro from Realm Maintenance is kind of the planner of this as far as I know, but it's a really big pre-convention convention where all the podcasters and content creators and people involved in making stuff for Blizzard games get together, and all are welcome, of course, and do things like the World of Podcast panel and rent out the ballroom in the Hilton, and it's kind of the welcome party to BlizzCon. And it's funded entirely through Kickstarter, and they have a little bumper we're going to play here because last year we were represented in the World of Podcast panel. Kenny was on that panel along with a bunch of other really great Hearthstone podcast hosts. We want it to happen again this year. They've got 3 days left, so it'll be done Saturday, which by the time of this podcast being published will be the last day of the podcast, or the last day of Con Before the Storm's Kickstarter. And so they're a little bit behind the World of Podcast goal, and they're not quite at the point where they can have the extra banquet room and make the panels happen. We really want those to happen, so we've supported them financially from the show, and we hope that you can too, if you have the ability. Here's the bumper.
The hype for BlizzCon 2018 has begun, and so has our planning for this year's Con Before the Storm.
Con Before the Storm will bring together fans and content creators for all of Blizzard franchises once again at the Anaheim Hilton on November 1st.
This is the largest Blizzard community-built event, and it's made possible thanks to everyone who supports our Kickstarter campaign, which is now live at conbeforestorm.com.
Our initial funding goal is $13,500, and we're confident we can hit that goal with the community's help.
As always, we plan to include meet and greet opportunities with dozens of content creators, including artists, podcasters, Twitch streamers, esports personalities, and much more.
Returning fan favorites that are already confirmed for this year include badge artist Egg Dishes and Tepish, as well as the return of shirt and button designer Nadia Lee.
Finally, it wouldn't be Con Before the Storm without World of Podcasts, which will be celebrating its 6th-year anniversary.
However, our plans for World of Podcast have grown, as have the costs to make it a reality, and we need your help to bring World of Podcast back for its best year yet.
Get ready for a great night of podcasting content should we hit our stretch goal of $24,500.
To learn more about our plans, stretch goals, and backer rewards, go to conbeforestorm.com and follow at conbeforestorm on Twitter for ongoing updates. See you at BlizzCon!
Yes, so that's going to be awesome, but I hope they can get everything going. Contribute if you can, and we have done so as well. All right, now we've got some coin concedes, which are no longer called shoutouts. So now Botticus is a big fan of the term coin concede. In fact, he's going to go first because he's so vocally in favor of the concept.
So I would like to coin concede to Appa. First and primarily, I am so excited about this weekend, mostly because of all the work he did to help me with my lineups. I actually had probably the most fun I've ever had playing Hearthstone the other night when after we had just like gotten on Discord and went over lineups and then we're playing against each other. It was just, I don't know. I had so much fun that night, and I really just want to give him a lot of credit because he did a lot for me, and I really appreciate it. I also want to concede to the Well Met podcast. JR put a call out on Twitter, and I responded not really thinking that I would be chosen, but they chose me to come on. So that will be going up today, I believe, which is going to be a couple days ago when everybody hears this. But either way, check out that podcast if you're not. It was me, JR, and Ray C, and those are a bunch of awesome guys. I had a bunch of fun on that cast, and make sure you guys check it out. And then the last one is to Phenom, and this one's just real quick because last night I was freaking out because I had to submit deck lists on Smash GG, and I've never used it before, and it's kept saying that I still have one more thing to do, and I was like, what am I missing? I keep clicking the thing and it doesn't tell me what that one thing I need to do is, but it says I still need to do it. So I was worried that I was going to get DQ'd for not submitting or something. But he came on, he said, send me a screenshot, and I sent it to him. He's like, you put your deck list in? I said, yeah. And he said, okay, you're good. It says the same thing for me. So really appreciate him coming to my aid, like at the last minute while I'm like, I want to go to sleep. And then, yeah, so appreciate that.
If you have like any problems with Smash GG, like before an event that uses it, like just like put out the bat signal and just tag Bloody and just be like, Bloody help. Because I did that for, I think, Atlanta last year. I didn't know what to do. And he was like, if anybody's having problems, just like tweet at me and I'll DM you. And I tweeted at him and he like walked me through some stuff. And I was like, this is fantastic customer service.
I'll keep that in mind for next time.
Yay. Eve, you ready for your coin concedes?
Yes, I am. I coin concede to coin concede. Does that count?
Yes. We accept any and all coin concedes here.
You invited me on the show. You were very gracious and fun, and I had a lot of fun time. So I coin concede to coin concede. I also coin concede to Cinder, who was a great co-host when we co-hosted the UHL match right before I came on here, and I had a lot of fun with him. It was the first time I've ever collaborated with him, and he was super gracious and helpful, and yeah, that was a really good experience. And I should probably just coin concede to Valen's Chosen, my co-hosts, and say I missed you this week. We didn't get to get together, and look forward to making another show next week.
Yay, all the feel goods. Appa, tell me about your coin concede.
Okay, now that I'm unmuting my mic, I'm going to go ahead and apologize if anybody can hear that sound in the background. But my pet rat decided it was time to wake up and start chewing on his wooden log right now. So I'm going to coin concede to Taco Bell because I had a taco craving and I filled that before the show. And I'm also going to coin concede to Midgame because that poor soul didn't know what a fish taco was. Because he's from Australia, and I'm assuming that they don't have a lot of Mexican food over there. And I had to explain to him what a fish taco actually was, the anatomy of a fish taco. And I'm also going to coin concede to Grandmasta Blasta, because obviously.
Because how could you not? Man.
Pew, pew, pew.
Yes.
Pew, 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 pew. Just get some finger lasers in there.
That's the next episode we release is just going to be 2 hours of pew sounds. That's all it's going to be. We have to say the entire episode like we're Beaker from the Muppets. All right. Well, my coin concedes, I've got a few. I want to coin concede to Deck Tech and Storm Rage because they were both in New York City this past week, and boy, did we have a good time going out. Yeah, it's they're good people. And I think I had actually coin conceded to Deck Tech last week, but you know what? He gets 2 coin concedes. He's a lawyer. You charge double. It's fine. I also want to coin concede to the UHL Rundown. Redwaller and Navalis put this together. It's a podcast about UHL and about the match, and it recaps it. But they did this thing this week where they actually took audio clips from the matches, from the Twitch matches, and played them in the episode. So, like, when they were talking about a match, they would cut to the audio moment where it actually happened in the match, where they were talking about 4 avalanches in one game, or they were talking about any number of plays, like about how I recruited a King Crush and smacked Versika in the face. It was really a compelling format where it felt like listening to a sports radio show, and you got to listen back to the moments as they were played back. So I really enjoyed that. Listened back to that in the train home today, and it was super compelling content. So I just really want to give a shout out to those guys for putting that together.
Yo, that was so good. I listened to it today, and not only did it sound amazing, but that has to be so much work. Can you just imagine how much work that is to like find the specific clip and cut it out and paste it into your like key? I don't even know how you keep the cast going like while you're doing it. Like I guess maybe you have to play the clip. Oh geez, I'm just thinking about how much work had to go into that. So I'll double that shout out or coin concede.
Yes, 2 coins, 1 concede. And Eve, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know it was short notice, but this actually came about by accident, because I'm not a Velen's Chosen podcast host, but Eve and I have similar sleep schedules in that they're both really messed up. And so she messaged me at some bizarre point of the night, I forget when. It's like, so when are we recording? I'm like, I don't think we are, but we'd love to work together. And then now here we are, 2 days later. So it worked out. Happy accident.
Yeah, usually Velen's Chosen is at the top of my chat list, so I just automatically sent off a message, but I had just been talking to you, so it went to you instead of to the Velen's Chosen chat. But I'm really happy it all worked out as well.
Yay. Thanks for coming on. And Eve, why don't you tell us where people can find you?
They can find me personally on Twitter and on Twitch at LoremasterEve. And they can find my podcast, Velen's Chosen Podcast, anywhere you can find podcasts. Also, we have our own website, which is called VelensChosen.com. Very simple, easy to find. I actually have the write-ups for all of the lore moments that I do on there. So if you like to read things and to look at pretty pictures, you can look those up on the webpage.
Yay. Yeah, the write-ups are super handy if you if you either can't listen at the moment or need something to follow along with, or you listen to them and you are desperate for more lore like the addict that you are. Not that I'm speaking for myself or anything. Eve, you got any more of those lore moments?
I just put one up. Did you listen to the most recent one, Gul'dan Part 2?
No, I didn't. I was doing a bit. I have I have the video saved.
Sorry.
Don't worry. Thank you for the Gul'dan. Is this going to be a 2-parter or a 3-fer?
Oh my gosh, Gul'dan's going to be like a 4.5-parter. There's so many Gul'dans.
Yes.
Like 3.
And for those of you that weren't playing World of Warcraft during Warlords of Draenor, just be aware that time travel makes things very complicated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very.
Don't ever do time travel. Like people making video games, just stay away from it. Please, just don't do it.
Yes. Well, maybe they've already done it, but they came back in time to prevent themselves from doing it.
It's just such an easy reset button whenever you do something silly, and then you're like, wait, I wish we didn't do that. Hit the button. Time travel.
But what if the time travel is the silly thing?
Then you
then
just
it's
time
Toki,
travel
the
V2.
time tinkerer. And then you just like make Rob go off the map with salt, because the second time you went around and tried to change it, it was worse than the first time.
That does sound like a likely outcome here. Appa, where can people find you?
On Twitter at Appa_HS, and on my Twitch in like a week at AppaHS, because I completely forgot to plug my Twitch last week. I had this whole thing about how I was coming back to streaming, and then I just didn't actually say my Twitch channel. It's AppaHS, no underscore. Twitter has an underscore. And also in Discord, because I just exist on my computer right now.
Yes. And soon you will exist in your computer, but like in a different physical space.
Yeah.
Hooray.
I'll still be a computer zombie, just in a different part of Louisiana.
And with good teeth.
Yes.
Yes.
With good teeth.
Also, I didn't coin concede, but we should all coin concede to Dr. Taylor.
Yup. Taylor Eve, or formerly Taylor Eve on Twitter, now Dr. Evil_HS, which is fantastic, by the way. That's such a good name, because her middle name is Eve, and then she just like put the L after. She spelled it EVEL. Anyways, she graduated from dental school and passed all of her exams, and now has a dental license here. So, after 8 years and $250,000, she did it.
I was confused.
But
and just casually hit legend too. Just while doing all that, we'll just hit legend too.
Yes,
and the final boss for legend, she was playing Big Spell Mage with Shudderwalk Shaman, so it was just extra awesome.
Man. And then Botticus, where can we find you?
So I'm on Twitter at BotticusHS. If I'm doing well this weekend, you'll probably see updates. If I'm not doing well, probably going to be pretty quiet over there. But normally you can find me on the weekends, twitch.tv/Botticus, but I'm going to be in Austin. So hopefully you'll see me on that Twitch channel, because that'd be sweet. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Don't do an Appa and lose for top 16 on stream, because that feels bad. Just win. Just win for top 16.
I like winning. Winning is fun.
Well, okay. Step 1, do an Appa and get in contention for top 8. Then continue and don't lose to Strife Crow when he makes a bunch of 5/5s.
What if I make a bunch of 4/4s with Faldori Strider? Because that card is sweet.
Don't give away your lineup.
What? It's open deck list.
What? Then it's fine. Okay. Anyways, you can find me on Twitter at ridiculousat, or on Twitch at twitch.tv/ridiculousat, or on Discord type in @ridiculousat, wherever people can find, or wherever people are talking about Hearthstone on Discord. I'm probably there.
All right. Hat's getting a little loopy. I think we did hit
it's okay. Yes.
On this podcast.
Man.
He's like Beetlejuice, except for you don't have to say his name 3 times. You only have to say it once.
Yes.
Or just mention tacos and he shows up.
I do want to point out I had chimichangas for dinner, and Appa was craving tacos because we were talking about tacos. And
we
then
were tacoing about tacos.
Yeah. We were giving them something to talk about. And then I was like, hey, Appa, I had chimichangas for dinner. He's like, he said a word that starts with F and is not family appropriate, and then immediately went to get tacos. So I feel at least
like we were talking about tacos, and he was like, I had chimichangas, and I was just like, you know what? If I'm late, this podcast can wait. I'm getting tacos.
Yes. And then tacos were had by all. That's going to do it for this week on Coin Concede. Keep calm and rogue on, and if you see us on the ladder, Coin Concede.
Grandmasta Blasta, Coin Concede.
Coin Concede.
Coin Concede.
Take cold comfort in your victory.
You win. I can rest now. You win. For now. Now, your victory proves nothing.
The day is yours.
I choose death. You have triumphed. This time